Howdy, howdy, folks. How's everybody doing today? Ooh, this is going to be a fun one. This is going to be a fun one. Yeah, let's see how many folks funnel in. I'm going to kind of just chill and warm up for the first few minutes here. I actually have some warm-up music. Fingers crossed that we don't get dinged for copyright, but, you know, we'll see. We'll see. Probably should be fine. I'm a giant Pink Floyd fan, so I figured while people were filing in here, we'd just start with a very appropriate song. A cover, though, a cover of my favorite Pink Floyd song. Perhaps the one or two people who are watching might already recognize it. You saw that here. The single most appropriate song I could pick, given the topic here. It's sort of a metal cover of Welcome to the Machine. That's a good one. Well, how's everybody doing today? Shout out in the chats if you are one of our regulars or not. Either way, thanks for being here. Hold on, though. We gotta listen to the good part. It's really fast. Here we go. This is where it really starts rocking. Here we go. What's up, JJ? How's it going? Hello, Ashton. How you guys doing? Thanks for being here. Welcome to the machine. Yeah, it gets pretty darn heavy there, I'll tell you what. All right. What's up, Mike? How are you? Yeah, I figured for the first couple minutes we would just chill and let some people get in. I don't want them to miss the important parts, but you know, thought we'd get pumped up with a little music here. Man, been obsessing over this for quite a while, put a lot of thought into it. I think you guys are going to find it very interesting. This is significantly more psychological, you could say. Yes, JJ, exactly. Best song I could have picked, I think, for this. Also, like I said, I'm a huge Pink Floyd fan, and I also like metal, so Pink Floyd metal cover is ideal. So, all right. It is Mercury retrograde. Who knows? Maybe that's all a bunch of BS. But you know, let's hope this all you know, goes through without a hitch. I'm surrendered to however it goes. We're just gonna go with the flow here and just see what happens. Yeah. By the way, I'm about to get red pilled here. Take some action. It's my little joke, since you know it's got the beet powder in it and it's red. So yeah, red pill. About to red pill it up. I already had a few of these, so I don't need too much more. All right, well, regardless of how many people are viewing now, doesn't really matter all that much. I'm going to get started. Where to begin? All right, so if you saw the first one, and I do recommend you do watch the first one first. If you are watching this on the replay, obviously, if it's live and you haven't, then just, you know, go back and watch it later. I'm hoping that the sequel ends up being even better than the original, but they're very different. So that with the original, we were focusing more on the technology itself, right? Talking about artificial intelligence, brain-machine interfaces, brain-computer interfaces, as they call it, possible applications for manipulation, weaponology, all sorts of weird stuff, right? And being inclined toward psychology and spirituality and philosophy, and zooming out and really seeing the deeper truth of what's happening. Obviously, there were some nuggets in there, right? This one is quite a bit more heavily focused on the psychology of what's going on, and goes a lot deeper. And I think it's significantly more important, actually, to be able to zoom out and to see things from that perspective. But they are a really nice counterbalance to each other, I think. But I'll let you be the judge. By the way, just FYI, I'm not really going to be answering a lot of questions. I'm going to have to probably ignore the chat while I'm giving this so I don't get too derailed. If y'all want to chat amongst yourselves, just whatevs. But if I don't answer your questions, just know that we'll be able to do that hopefully toward the end if we have time. But I have a lot of material to get through, so we'll see where I'm at after I've gone through all of this. Okay, so okay, I started off with a couple quotes here, and if your screen is smaller, you might not be able to read everything I have on here. Either way, it's all good. Vernon Howard, who I don't particularly know, but he's the one who said, "You can't escape from a prison if you don't know you're in one." That's interesting, right? So you must first understand the limitations of where you are and that you are perhaps stuck or in some sort of prison first in order to realize, in order to actually escape, right? This is another great one. This actually comes from the usual suspects, Verbal Kint. "The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist." Now, obviously, if I say something like the devil, right, my goal is to be maximally compatible with all belief systems. So regardless if you are, religious or not or whatever, when I say something like that, you're free to interpret the word devil as literal, if that works with, the way that you view things, or as a metaphor, right? And in general, I think it's smart to be able to view things, metaphorically when appropriate in certain situations, right? So there's going to be sort of a reoccurring theme here of what does that even mean? Who are the bad guys? Who's the devil? Who's the matrix? Who are the people trying to control us or whatever it is, right? And how much time do we need to spend focusing on that? Just something to ponder. All right. Central theme here. Very important idea. So the Matrix and the way that we use it as a metaphor, which is one of the most powerful metaphors that any movie has ever given us, really, because it applies to so many different things, right? But it's a bit of an oversimplification the way that we use it, because the Matrix, it's not just a matter of I escaped the Matrix, I took the red pill, now I see everything clearly. That's not actually how it works in reality. How things actually work is that the Matrix has many layers. And so the metaphor I would like to share is that it's essentially an onion, right? As you awaken, whatever that word even means to you, you could say awaken spiritually, mentally, growing different ways, who knows, right? Again, you can interpret what I'm saying different ways that work for you. But as one awakens, one does that through multiple layers of the Matrix. So when you wake up from one layer into the next layer, you haven't fully escaped the Matrix. You've moved to a higher level of the Matrix, right? Very, very important concept. This is a more nuanced and more complex and a far more accurate way of understanding how the Matrix works and what it actually is. And it's much more appropriate to how the mind actually works, I believe. It also is a bit humbling, because if you think that you've figured out everything about how the universe works or how politics works or whatever it is, you might not have. It might just be that you figured out something that has gotten you to a certain layer, right? We figured a certain level of things out, but there's still more to discover. Now, this part down here is kind of strange. It might even sound sort of paranoid, but the Matrix responds and adapts to our level of awareness in a dynamic fashion, aka countermeasures. This actually kind of applies to something that happened in the Matrix 4. I don't want to give away too many spoilers, but I'll just put it this way. Let's say, you graduate from one level of the Matrix to another. Then the Matrix sees that you've done that and responds with new countermeasures to prevent you from moving forward, in a sense, right? Now, again, what is the Matrix? I'm not going to fully define that. I'm going to leave it sort of open-ended, right? Is the Matrix, am I talking about only certain actual human individuals trying to control us? Am I talking about some sort of metaphysical evil force? Am I talking about something that's just within the collective psyche? All of the above and none of the above, depending, right? So I don't have to fully define what I'm talking about in order to make the point. So this will make more sense, though, as I continue. This is a metaphor I think is one that you'll tend to encounter in various different, perhaps different spiritual teachers, traditions, and also something that's just kind of intuitive. It's this sort of metaphor that the earth is a school, essentially, or simile. The earth is like a school and there are many grades. Now, some people might be upset by that. I might get in trouble because they're like, well, that means that someone's better than someone else, right? But no, that's not actually what this metaphor is getting at. What this metaphor is getting at is, well, first of all, you need to differentiate between something called a dominator hierarchy and a growth hierarchy. A dominator hierarchy is what most people associate with I'm higher up in the hierarchy than you, I'm better than you, I control you, right? Like a military type of a structure, right? You are inferior, right? That's not what this is. That's one kind of hierarchy. This is called a growth hierarchy. Growth hierarchy is a school, right? You have like K through 12, for example. The 12th graders are not better than the kindergartners, right? The seniors in high school, no one's better than anyone else. This is just a system that allows people to mature and to learn. That's all it is, right? It's not about anyone being better than anyone else, but there is a reality to this. And this also corresponds to that concept from the previous page that the matrix is essentially like an onion, right? And we're moving from the center to the periphery of the onion as you're trying to exit the matrix. So again, moving up a grade in this metaphor. And again, like I said, do what you will with these metaphors, not trying to get anyone to believe anything fundamentally different about reality per se. If this is something that works with the way you see things, that's great. If not, that's fine too, not trying to force you into a certain belief system, but just feel out the metaphor, see if this resonates, right? Moving up a grade is like moving toward the outermost layer of the matrix, like I said, right? These are the same thing, essentially. Okay, now, this is interesting. This is actually the only video I'm going to show in this entire presentation, I have decided. One of the reasons for that is actually that it's easier not to have to worry about copyright violation if you do that. But this is a spiritual teacher who I like quite a bit named Matt Kahn. And he has this short video. I've done a little bit of editing on. It's a little bit over 2 minutes. This is essential to the presentation. It has to do with what he calls the 3 waves of ascension. And I'm just going to play the video for you, and then I'm going to explain. And also, remember, this doesn't have to be something that's totally metaphysical per se. It can also be a metaphor for people who are going along different lines, perhaps, of spiritual or mental or emotional development. So it's not necessarily entirely metaphysical. Yeah.
First wave of ascension. Those of us who are already born into a spiritual impulse that are anchoring the light, unwavering in the light, and would rather stand for the light and risk losing or starting over any aspect of our life to stand in the light. Second wave of ascension. Those that have spiritual awareness, but on an impulse level are still acting out the density of conditioning. These are the beings, and nothing I'm saying makes one better than the other, by the way, because everything is just playing a part. But second wave of ascension are the people who believe, and it's not wrong to believe this, that a new spiritual paradigm can only occur through radical social justice. Then there's the third wave of ascension.
This is where it gets interesting.
Third wave of ascension are just the wave of beings who will get the spiritual impulse one of these days. And while we are becoming one with divinity, third wave of ascension are beings that are going to be further seduced into unconsciousness and who are going to be merging not with divinity, but with their divinity, which is called technology. Third wave of ascension are technology zombies. People who are addicted to their phones. People who get so close to their phones and technology over time that they literally will be interested in merging with their technology. You think an implant is going to be forced? No, it's going to be desired. I mean, I can have apps inside here. I can have artificial intelligence. I can become this robotic superpower person. I could put like a PlayStation in my mind? Really? You think it's going to be mandatory? That's not how this game. The arrogance is so incredible in unconsciousness. People are going to be waiting in line like it's a new Star Wars movie for the chance to merge with technology. Because for a third dimension, for a third wave of ascension, technology is God.
Interesting, right? So, technology is God. Interesting. Yeah. So again, like I said, it's not 100% that we have to say that this is all about metaphysics, but you could look at it from a spiritual perspective. And of course, probably many people watching this are inclined toward that. But long story short, we have perhaps 3 groups of people. And also that just because you're perhaps in one group doesn't mean that you can't move around, right? From one to the other, right? And it also doesn't mean that anyone's better than anyone else, because everyone's playing their part, in this grand divine drama, whatever you want to call it, in my perspective. But yes, to reiterate what Matt Kahn was saying, first wave is the people, I'm just going to kind of give my version, right? People have known about the Matrix for a while, and they comprehend perhaps the actual deeper significance of the machine. Second wave, people who have more recently discovered the Matrix, if you want to call it that, and who want to rage against the machine. And then the third wave is the people who kind of don't really know what the Matrix is and are now fully becoming the machine. Something like that, right? And again, this is not to say that anyone is better than anyone else, to point fingers, and even to say that this is perhaps tragic. I do believe that everything happens for a reason, and I am personally extremely optimistic about humanity in general. But I think that if you're the kind of person watching this program, you already know that there's something very creepy happening with technology, right? That it's being used for domination and control, obviously, and that people will be using it to stay asleep. And yes, these are the people who are becoming the machine. So, very important point here. The shadow. So, it's going to get pretty intensely psychological here. I am a big fan of Carl Jung. Jungian psychology is actually what got me into the healing arts in general. When I was doing my undergrad, I started off actually studying English, creative writing, and then I took an amazing class that was all about Jungian psychoanalysis and understanding the psyche through the collective unconscious and archetypes and shadow work and all these cool concepts from Carl Jung. The shadow is defined as essentially that which is hidden or repressed within your mind or your psyche. Psyche, if you want to sound fancy, but whatever. Right. So now remember also, so shadow sounds really dark and scary, and it certainly can be. But at the same time, there's also the gold in the shadow. Not everything in the shadow is bad. And in fact, there are things in there that if we explore our minds, would actually blow us away in terms of seeing who we really are on a deeper level that are very positive and beautiful. But yes, all the things that we've repressed, all the things about ourselves. Now, even me saying this might kind of weird some people out, right? Maybe you're thinking, oh God, like this is going to get really heavy. And yeah, it can be a bit heavy. And these topics are heavy. We're talking about the Matrix. We're talking about control. We're talking about using technology to keep people asleep. These are heavy topics for sure. But I'm trying to do this in a way where I'm not creating an era of where this was a huge tragedy, right? If you're going to explore the shadow, you want to do it with a little bit of lightness, if at all possible, and also a lot of compassion. Very important. But yeah, that which is hidden, repressed within psyche, the things you don't know about yourself, within the Jungian psychoanalytic paradigm, the idea is that, confronting what's in here is unpleasant, but it's necessary. Very, very necessary. So it's not a fun process because a lot of the stuff is like kind of heavy, right? things that you don't want to admit about yourself, things that are not going well in your life, right? And it's not great, because who wants to do that, right? Wouldn't we rather just focus on the positive? And that has its place too, of course. But there's a lot of very important information here. Now, we can also think in terms of collective shadow. Collective shadow. Amelia says, doing some major shadow work right now. All right, good for you, Amelia. It's not easy, I know. Not easy at all. All right, so once again, welcome to the machine. For those of you guys who weren't here at the beginning, I played the Royal We played Welcome to the Machine by a cover band who does a metal cover of the famous Pink Floyd song. So we just went over what the shadow is. I told you that there's also a collective shadow, right? We can think in terms of individual or collective, right? So an archetype that represents unconscious automatic behavior. That's what I believe the machine to be. This is like maybe one of the central theses of this whole presentation is the machine as an archetype, as a symbol. What does it symbolize? It symbolizes unconscious automatic behavior. When we do things with no awareness in an automatic programmed fashion, we behave like a machine, right? Now, if you wanted theoretically to control a population, it would be, better for people to behave more machine-like, right? Because machines are programmable. You can program them. You can tell them what to do, and they'll just run those scripts, right? They're not so unpredictable as humans. As I talked about in Stay Human episode 1, there is this sort of curve where machines are becoming more human-like. They're becoming more complex. We're going toward artificial general intelligence, and humans are actually becoming more machine-like and less human, and we're converging in the middle is basically the idea. At the same time, we have this weird role reversal where machines are getting smart enough to actually understand human psychology, figuring out how to program us. So we have machines programming humans, right? So anyway, yes, machine, it is like sort of a master archetype of unconsciousness. It represents unconscious automatic behavior. So we'll come back to that quite a few times. But yeah, also I'd just like to add, we're going through a global confrontation with our machine-like qualities. It's a shadow confrontation. Within the global collective shadow, we have this machine archetype that we have for a long time been highly programmable, highly susceptible to running scripts in an unconscious fashion, right? This sort of automatic behavior, lack of consciousness, lack of self-reflection. And we're going through right now this collective, very messy, not so fun process of confronting this human tendency to become machine-like. Now, some people, probably not the people watching this, but some folks would probably get really mad if they saw this. Machines are not conscious and never will be, because it's weird. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but have you noticed that there are these attempts by popular media to portray machines as truly conscious? Have you noticed that, right? This idea that machines can become so sophisticated that they like all of a sudden have a soul, right? Right. I believe that the worldview, the materialist scientific worldview, essentially believes that the only thing that consciousness actually is that it is simply the result, or what they call an epiphenomenon of brain activity, that there is no higher consciousness, no soul, anything else, right, within the body, and that we are really just machines, right? So this makes perfect sense to that particular worldview. If that's your worldview, you're probably not going to resonate with 98% of this presentation, but but anyway, yeah. So we have in all the movies and all the books, like not all of them, but so many science fiction, right, portraying machines as if they were people. Right? That in the future, machines are going to get so fancy and so complex, and they're going to have what they call artificial general intelligence, which we define as the human one, that they are going to become basically conscious or people. But this whole idea, these attempts to portray media, these media attempts to portray machines as conscious, they are themselves, I believe, a symptom of a mass neurosis stemming from a hidden desire to remain unconscious and to become the machine, become the automaton. So there is a movement, a global movement to become more conscious and less machine-like, and this would be almost like a countermeasure. There is a desire to stay asleep. Anytime you have where a person, an ego, whatever, like has the opportunity to awaken, there can be a certain pain associated with that awakening. Pain is oftentimes, unfortunately, but that's just how it works. Pain can be the catalyst of consciousness. Another essential concept from psychology. Pain can be a catalyst of consciousness. Again, it's not always fun. It can be a messy process, but it can make us grow and become better, right? And more aware. But this would be a countermeasure, right? Of like, we want to stay asleep. So I really do believe that there is this hidden desire to stay machine-like, to stay unconscious, and that if we see ourselves as machines, then it's easy to see machines as humans because we're essentially the same, right? So the more we're convinced by media that machines can become just like us, the more we're also concomitantly convinced that we are inherently like machines. And that is actually true to the extent that we behave in an unconscious, programmable, predictable fashion. I know it's getting pretty heady, right? Okay, so humanity is what is in a chaos cycle right now. I'll define that in a second. We are being forced to confront the collective shadow, as I said. Chaos cycle, what does that mean? Well, there are times of great upheaval where things look very chaotic. Last 2 years now, things have just gotten more and more nuts. Obviously, things are getting crazy. And yeah, it certainly is chaotic. But chaos is not inherently bad. In fact, there is a dialectic between chaos and order. And if you go too far in either direction, actually, it's really bad. So too much order does not leave room for growth and novelty because everything stays the same and it's a form of stasis. Too much chaos, obviously, everything falls apart, right? But when we move from order, from the status quo toward chaos, in the direction of chaos, that involves an allowance of a certain amount of novelty. And in that novelty, there is new growth, but things do look messy. But there are cycles and seasons on a collective level and on an individual level, just like there are, just like the earth has seasons. A person, you can have seasons of your own mind and soul development, and a society can have seasons as well. And in some of those seasons, you have death and chaos and things falling apart. And in some of those seasons, you have things being rebuilt. And then in some of those seasons, you have not that much activity, just kind of status quo, right? And those are all necessary for for life. There are cycles of life, right? As essentially, I have because I have training as an acupuncturist, I'm essentially a medical Taoist, right? So we are trained in Chinese medicine to look at the life cycles and to work with the seasons. And there is a deep psychological significance to that, right? So if all of a sudden you found that in the last few weeks of your life, you're feeling like things are kind of falling apart a little bit, that can be really depressing. It can be awful. But at the same time, if you know, hey, I'm just in a personal winter, for example, then it's like, okay, well, within the greater context of my life, things are kind of falling apart. Maybe relationships are falling away. Maybe, this or that, right? Whatever it is. Then you know that that's actually just the necessary death that precedes the rebirth, right? Just like trees drop all their leaves during winter, right? And animals have to go hibernate and they can't, you don't see animals, building as much stuff like their nests or whatever. You see them actually, hiding out and hibernating, right? So there are seasons, but right now we are in what I would call chaos cycle. Things are kind of falling apart, and it's important to know this because you will perhaps tend to maybe be less upset by seeing how batshit crazy things are in the world, right? If you know that perhaps there's a higher purpose and it's part of a larger cycle. I say as I casually scratch my back with this back scratcher. Yeah, I play drums, so I obsessively will do this anytime I have some kind of stick in my hand. So yes, but yeah, chaos cycle. So we are a big force to confront the collective shadow. It's not a fun process. It sucks, but it's absolutely necessary. And this whole weird transhumanism machine thing is part and parcel of this collective shadow confrontation process. Again, major thesis here of this presentation. So again, as I said before, though, the shadow is not all bad. A lot of things that are in the shadow, again, the word sounds very dark, very heavy, and it kind of is, and shadow work is not a fun thing, but there are also things in the shadow that are inherently positive. Your ability to become a Gandhi or a Martin Luther King or a sage, that's also in the shadow. We're going to come back to that multiple times. I believe that for millennia, for a long time, we have allowed ourselves to be run by programs. We have been programmed in a sense that we're not in control of and often do not serve us, but rather some sort of hidden agenda, just like a machine would be. So this idea that humans are in a sense programmable, again, this reflects on this central idea that we have machine-like qualities, and these qualities get in the way of us being fully human, right? So for example, if let's say somebody is in some sort of really weird cult or something, right? Let's say you grew up in some sort of really wacko cult that has some compound out in the middle of nowhere, right? So, and then you were told all these wrong things, like the leader of the cult is God and everybody else outside the cult is bad and evil and like all these weird things. You're going to actually live with those weird beliefs and programs, and they're going to make you do really weird stuff. It's not in your best interest. You have been programmed by that cult to do things that aren't really in your best interest. They really aren't. You're serving the cult leader, and in some sense, you're serving the group, the collective. But a lot of these beliefs are toxic to you. They are parasitic to your mind. They don't help you, right? So this idea, again, I'm going to say this ad nauseum, so it really sinks in. The more programmable we are, more susceptible to these destructive, negative beliefs. Again, perfect example, if you grew up in some weird cult out in the middle of nowhere, right? And they put all these weird beliefs in your head, right? That is a reflection of this machine archetype within the shadow, right? We are machine-like to the extent that we are programmable, right? And all sorts of different power structures that have been trying to manipulate for profit and power and whatever, they will tend to, put weird beliefs into people's heads. Now, it doesn't mean that every single organization is a cult or every religion is bad or anything like that. That's not what I'm saying. Because a lot of beliefs that people are raised with are actually really helpful and very beneficial, right? Like the belief that you should be kind to other people and, have manners and being acculturated, being inculcated with certain beliefs by your parents is not always a bad thing. You need those. A lot of them are actually very positive and really help you, right? Like being told that you should clean up your room. It's probably going to make you a better, more responsible adult when you're young or when you're older, so that you actually tidy up your place. It's not a mess, right? So it's not that everything that we're told and inculcated with as children is some sort of negative program. But the thing is, we have a tendency to just absorb all of it like a sponge. And it's the self-reflection process and the sort of separating the wheat from the chaff, so to speak, that makes us truly human, where you can actually go through and be like, well, this particular thing I was taught is not super helpful, and it's actually kind of toxic. This thing over here is actually legit, right? Like this thing is helpful and great. This thing over here, not so great, Maybe somebody had a really weird dad who was like super violent and was like taught that any dude who you don't agree with, you should beat up, right? That's clearly you've been programmed with a very toxic belief, right? And your ability to actually look at that and to be like, you know what, I'm going to do my best to get rid of that and recognize that it's not helpful. That's a very human trait. All right. Next slide. What is this hidden agenda? Now, so when I say things like hidden agenda, it gets into more conspiratorial territory, and I don't shy away from that entirely. I often say on this show and on the different lives that I do, if you want to get into the nitty gritty of who's responsible for this and that, go check out Shane's stuff or Alex Jones or whoever you like, and I'm into some of that. But I also think that something I'll say multiple times, pointing the finger too much at individuals who are part of this control structure, or whatever you want to call it, that itself is actually a matrix countermeasure to distract you and prevent you from growing as well. And that's like super, super red pill territory. This is what this information stream, this is why this is a bit different from a lot of other presenters who talk about this kind of information. Because I truly believe that, yes, there are nefarious individuals. Like, let's just take an example, right? A certain gentleman from who had a company in Seattle whose name rhymes with Trill Bates, right? Now, is he part of this control system, this matrix? Is he one of the major players? I mean, he doesn't seem like he has our best interest at heart. When I listen to him on a gut, on a soul level, intuitively, when I hear that guy talk, I'm like, probably not. But at the same time, is it helpful for me to fixate just on how bad or evil this guy is? It's good to stay informed to a certain extent. And then at a certain point, if you continue to get obsessed with pointing the finger and focusing on who the bad guys are, another psychology professor of mine used to say, when you point a finger at someone, you have three pointing right back at you. So too much finger pointing actually itself is a distraction, and that will also prevent you from moving to higher levels of awareness, and is another actual matrix technique, to use this metaphor, this extended metaphor, right, of matrix, whatever it is, to actually keep you stuck. So again, whatever level you're on, there are matrix countermeasures in a sense, right, to keep you where you're at. And so it's something to be aware of. If you're spending too much time focusing on who the bad guys are and hating them, then that right there is actually going to prevent you from growing. So some of that is helpful, and it's certainly activism and standing up for your rights. That's all has its place. But too much of that finger pointing and obsessing over who's bad and who's evil will actually keep you stuck. So just something to know about. All right. But yeah, so what is this hidden agenda? Who are the bad guys? Who runs the matrix? Don't worry too much about it. Right? Worry a little bit. And certainly, like I said, protests necessary, standing up for your rights as a sovereign being, absolutely necessary. And yeah, investigating if there are people in power committing crimes against humanity, then yeah, that's part of the process. We need to know about that. But don't worry about it somewhat, but not too much. Just know that that is another trap, and a lot of people fall into that trap. A lot. All right, so here's another really, really core concept. One of the most interesting and most important and potentially edifying on a spiritual and psychic level for you guys is this idea of ego inflation and deflation. So, quick disclaimer. For anyone who is really into Jungian psychology, I have oversimplified this, and I've even changed the name a little bit. The actual original is ego inflation and alienation. I've changed it to deflation just to simplify it, but it's actually called alienation. This is really intuitive. If I were to explain it in the classic Jungian sense, it would get really abstract and heady, and it would take a little bit too much time. So to make this easier to grok, I have altered it a bit, and even to the point where some of it's maybe not even, exactly what it was originally intended to be. But I think this is a very functional model, and I think it's critical. So here we go. Over time, your ego will naturally switch the highlighter from the that thing, back scratcher. All right. Over time, your ego will naturally go through this inflation deflation cycle. Again, like I said, originally called alienation, but we'll call it deflation. All right. So there are going to be times, it's like psychic weather, psychic seasons, right? Like we said, there are going to be times when naturally you feel pretty good about yourself, relatively good, right? And you're like, yeah, everything's going well, people are telling me how awesome I am, and I'm doing well at work, and whatever, right? I'm feeling productive and smart and blah, 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 right? And then there are going to be times you're like, I'm feeling off. Things are not flowing very well. I'm having challenges in my relationships or at work or whatever, right? And you're not feeling very good about yourself. And sometimes these can be a direct result of actual life events. And other times it can just be the psychic weather. It's just time for it, for whatever reason, astrological or who knows, right? Whatever causes this. God only knows. So inflation, deflation, right? Everybody has experienced this. There are times when everything's hunky-dory, everything's kind of going your way, relatively speaking, much better, right? Not necessarily perfect, right? And you're feeling pretty inflated. You're like, yeah, I'm pretty awesome, like everything's good, right? And then there are times when not so good, right? Now, obviously, so this green one right here, this would be a slightly healthier normal curve for someone. And then this red are extremes, right? So on the extreme end of ego inflation, we have mania and narcissism, right? So if you are super duper hyperinflated, you think that you're God. You think that everyone else is an NPC, non-player character, right? Everyone else is like a player in your game. This is where narcissists hang out. What people call sociopaths, people with extreme mania, right? Cult leaders, I am God, I'm the best, I have all the power, I'm the smartest, a lot of guru types, unfortunately, kind of hang out there. Not to say all gurus are bad, but there are quite a few who end up being shysters, and yeah, they're hyperinflated, right? And then on the other extreme end, this trough on the red line here, right? So we have hyperinflated, hyperdeflated. This would be somebody who is in extreme state of depression, right? And this is equally very, very sad, quite tragic, where people just get kind of in this very low place where they think very, very badly of themselves and very low energy, et cetera, right? So these are the extremes of ego inflation, deflation. This is a slightly healthier version, right? Normal highs and lows, And what's really interesting here is you do have to wonder how technology, one question is how technology might be affecting this. Just something to ponder. There's something, kind of a heady topic, it's a heady word, it's called solipsism. Solipsism is the idea that the entire world is a world of experience, and there's only one experiencer, and that's you. This idea that, again, everyone else is an NPC, right? That you're the only one who's real, and everybody else is just like this video game, that it all revolves around you, right? So think of your megalomaniac, egomaniac, narcissist, right? It's this tendency to kind of be like, I'm the most important, I'm the most real. Everybody else is like this sort of like secondary character, right? Right. I'm the main character. I'm the more important one. Everybody else is just like some supporting role, And so when people get stuck here, what this actually is this is a response to this deep, deep feeling of worthlessness. This is the body-mind apparatuses, the psyche's attempt to cure permanently any kind of feelings of worthlessness and to never, ever go into the shadow and see what's not working. So if you've ever known someone who is a narcissist, the tendency will be, if you say anything about maybe their behavior, they will never really own up to and say, you know what, I was out of line. I'm really sorry. Like a normal person perhaps might go through periods of inflation where they're acting a little bit more like this, and that's normal. But somebody who's in extreme inflation and they're just really in this mode of like the world literally revolves around me, and I am the actual player and everybody else is like a game character. People who are stuck in that, they're not going to go into their shadow. They're not going to actually look at what's not working, because if they did, they wouldn't stay narcissists, right? They would actually self-reflect. They would realize, what, things that I'm doing are hurting people and it's not all about me. And so, yeah, they just get stuck here, basically. It's sad, really, but that's, and when we're talking about pointing the finger at certain people and saying, these are the kinds of people, like I said, the gentleman whose name rhymes with Trill Bates, then, they're probably hanging out around here, right? This is where those kind of people hang out, because if you're the kind of person who's actually running the freaking matrix, whatever that is, again, I'm not going to define the matrix. That's up to you to define it. But the control system and trying to manipulate people and trying to get people to merge with technology so we can control them, trying to track people, trying to keep everyone surveilled 24/7, predict their behavior. If you're the kind of person who actually thinks that doing that is good and that, you're so smart that, you're going to help humanity by manipulating them, you're probably hanging out here in this extreme inflation state where you get stuck here. But the funny thing is that, again, this only happens as a response to an extreme perception of worthlessness and total emptiness inside. Total separation from the self with a capital S in Jungian terms, separation from God in theological terms, separation from your higher self in more general spiritual terms, whatever term you want to use, but total separation from that. No spiritual core whatsoever. Just complete emptiness inside. And yeah, mania, egomania, and so it really is sad. But these are obviously, at the end of the day, it's important to have compassion for these kind of people while also drawing boundaries and keeping yourself safe and not being a doormat, right? So finding that nice balance, right? But yeah, these people are sick. And just because someone is sick doesn't mean that, you don't also need to protect yourselves against them, right? You can have compassion at a distance for psychopaths, So it's about finding that balance of being real, where you're like, okay, some of these people are probably dangerous and they probably are doing not so great things, but at the same time, we don't have to hate them, but we do need to maybe call them out and maybe, protect ourselves, whatever, right? So just find that balance there. But yeah, I do wonder also, just FYI, I have contemplated with this whole thing about inflation here. All right, well, one little thing here. What does technology do in terms of this whole inflation deflation cycle? One thing, and it could go both ways, but for example, there's been research where people who did more selfies, so the study just the other day, I was doing some research, people who have more selfies, who take more selfies, then they gave them this like personality inventory and they had higher amounts of, narcissistic type tendencies. Doesn't mean they're full blown narcissists. It just means more of those tendencies, right? At the same time, also though, especially younger people will compare themselves in terms of attractiveness or whatever, probably male and female, probably more women, probably a lot more girls, right? And make yourself feel really bad about yourself through social media. Anyway, so just something to contemplate. Not really a core concept for this presentation, but something, this little side issue there. But what is core is this idea that there is a universal program of worthlessness, I believe, that results in a compensatory inflation and prevents us from exploring the shadow. So super, super core concept here. And this actually comes from an experience I had recently of going through some very difficult emotions and doing some sort of shadow work, exploring what was going on, and then having this sort of message come to me. And this idea was, if you were just hunky-dory all the time, if everything was going right in your life, if, status quo, you would never actually look into the shadow because it's not really a vibrational match, right? Like things have to kind of, like shit has to kind of hit the fan sometimes. Things have to sometimes go wrong for you to then get deflated enough where you're actually going to see what's not working, And there are cycles in life. There are times of growth and coasting and just like everything's hunky-dory, right? Where that's what's meant to happen, right? And those are the times when you will be a bit more inflated, when you're like, well, everything's going great. I'm awesome, everything's going great in all these different parts of my life, work, relationships, family, whatever, right? And those aren't the times when, you're probably going to like, why would you, right? If it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? And if you can't see what's broken and if everything seems to be working fine, then you're not gonna, but then there are these times when the universe, God, whatever, your psyche, whatever word you want to use, will deflate you on purpose to get you to actually do this shadow work, right? So this is where the actual magic can happen, but this feels horrible to us. It feels really bad. It's not fun. It's really unpleasant. And this is literally what's happening on a collective level right now. We are in this trough period of collective deflation. This is one of my unique thoughts, my unique contributions, just on my own recent meditations and trying to figure out what I was actually going to tell you guys and what the higher wisdom is here, right? We are in a collective shadow exploration, which is induced by this deflation right here. We're in this deflation cycle. I think that probably on average, the average human after the last couple of years, when everything's gone crazy, probably feels maybe a little bit more deflated, maybe a little bit less great about themselves. Not necessarily everybody, but I think perhaps on average, right? So again, when you're in this part of the cycle, the deflation cycle, doesn't feel good. The tendency is to confront things that are not working, right? And to see things that are, within the shadow, obviously, right? But it is, again, necessary so that you can kind of diagnose the problem and be a little bit more honest about, all right, like maybe here's something that's, that's in my life that needs to change, right? Something that's not working, to confront things that aren't the best. But the thing is that, we'll get more into this in a bit, but it's kind of scary to see things about yourself that are not great, right? Maybe patterns that are destructive or whatever it is, right? And we all have that. It's really not pleasant. And so the tendency to judge ourselves and to feel really bad is to just run screaming out of the shadow and be like, anything but this. How do we reinflate ourselves to get out of this shadow exploratory deflationary state? And I think that you can actually view some of these fluctuations in terms of how are we reinflating ourselves, trying to compensate and be like, I don't want to go there, right? But like sometimes the universe will drag you kicking and screaming into the shadow and you'll be like, no, I don't want to. It feels bad. You're just like, yes, I know, but I'm trying to teach you something. I'm trying to show you something. And right now on a global level, that's what we're seeing. We're seeing all the institutions that are no longer serving us. We're seeing all the things that were previously hidden. Like, I'm sure you guys, probably most of y'all, if you're watching this, you probably grok what I'm saying, that a lot of, we're witnessing a lot of systems starting to crumble because we're seeing that they haven't served us very well. They're not working. Maybe they used to work, but a lot of these systems are not working. A lot of the way that we've set society up. And there's also weird criminal dark stuff happening behind the scenes that needs to be exposed, of course, and that's not my job to go into all the details on that, but clearly I'm aware of that. And I'm sure a lot of y'all are too, right? Things that should not be happening at all. And we're confronting it and it's not fun at all. This is a chaos cycle. Like I said, chaos cycle, right? Shadow confrontation. But this universal program of worthlessness, that's another whole rabbit hole. Speaking of rabbit holes, by the way, because this is a Matrix themed presentation, and because Matrix has a lot of Alice in Wonderland themed stuff, I did actually put this piece by my friend Elizabeth Banker. It's the same mushroom that you see in Alice in Wonderland. She's an amazing painter, super awesome, Elizabeth Banker. I had it, so I decided to put it right here in the background. Meant to point that out at some point. Anyway, just to gotta lighten the mood once in a while, All right, we'll get back into this universal program of worthlessness and what that actually means in a sec. So yeah, again, just to reiterate, deflation is necessary to see what's not working, but our egos, we don't really like that. And we will compensate by trying to reinduce inflation. This is happening on a global scale, you know. So you could look at, like, if you're meant to be in a more deflationary place, you know, where you're kind of like, you know, I don't mean down in the dumps where you're so depressed you can't do anything, but where you're just like kind of like, you know, this doesn't feel great, but like sort of more exploring the shadow. The tendency will be sometimes, okay, what do I do to inflate myself back up? You know, like I need somebody to make me feel good, right? I need a boyfriend or girlfriend to compliment me, or I need external validation, or drugs, or food, or shopping, or infinitely scrolling on Instagram, right? Like whatever it is, as a sort of an opiate to get you out of that state. So, you know, you can either reinflate yourself, or you can also dissociate. Dissociation is a favorite tactic of the psyche to avoid things that are uncomfortable. And what could be a better way of dissociating than by strapping a screen to your face 24/7, right? Like that meme that's on the CHOQ website, or on the CHOQ Instagram, that has you know, like in the 90s, we were told don't sit too close to the television. And that was a common thing that, you know, my parents said, and that I heard everybody's parents said, don't sit too close to television. And literally now we're like, yep, no, it's fine. Put a screen right on your face and just wear it for hours a day. Shit, go to work and wear a screen the whole time. That's fine, right? Like, why not? It's totally cool. Just strap actually 2 screens with Wi-Fi to your face and just do that 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day, no problem. Times have changed quite a bit, right? But yes, so technology can be used as a way of dissociating and as a sort of opiate. It can, in a sense, technology is becoming the new opiate of the masses, right? And that's actually really relevant, because technology is becoming a replacement for religion and for true spiritual connection and connection to the higher intelligences, higher wisdom, source, God, divine, whatever term, again, works with your belief system. Again, always ideally seeking belief system compatibility with whatever works for you guys. I'm assuming that probably, again, if you're watching this, your belief system is not, you're probably not a radical materialist who believes that we're only biological exclusively. If you do, and you're watching this and you're not super mad at me, then I'm proud of you. But I just assume that most likely everyone watching this has some sort of idea of perhaps there being a transcendent soul, or that we have some sort of spiritual reality. And if not, that's fine. Again, whatever works for you. But I digress. All right. But yes, we do need to become deflated sometimes to see what's not working, because if everything's going great, we're going to be less likely to actually go inward and see what might not be working, right? So again, there is this core program of worthlessness, I believe. All human operating systems seem to have this. And again, I'm purposely using term like human operating system, right? Again, of course, I'm the guy who says you are not a machine, right? So I'm using this very consciously. What we have in our mind and brain is not an operating system. An operating system is actually just, you know, something that humans created that maybe in some way even mimics our nervous system, right? But in a sense, you know, going along with the theme here, right? A program, in quotes, right? Because what humans actually run are not programs. Program is just a metaphor that comes from machines and comes from the software realm that describes something similar to what's happening, but it's not literally that. So again, using this consciously. But yeah, core program of worthlessness, this idea that we suck, that we are worthless. It seems to be, and I can't really even say where this comes from, but if you really look at the mind, this tends to happen. And again, regarding these folks, I'm just going to go back really fast. Regarding these folks who are in the super duper narcissistic manic state, you could be like, well, they don't feel worthless. They think they're the best. The reason that they think they're so awesome and that they are the best is because they're compensating for, this is their solution to this idea of worthlessness, that they're no good, right? And I'm going to get to the actual solution here. We're diagnosing the problem. There are solutions. So it's not all dark. Just wanted to reiterate though, there seems to be this core program of worthlessness, and it tends to prevent us from accessing the shadow. Because if you feel not so great about yourself, going into the shadow is going to make you feel even worse about yourself, potentially, right? If you already kind of have this like underlying weird, like, oh, right? And so your tendency is going to be, you're going to try to compensate by reinflating yourself, and there's all sorts of unhealthy ways to do that. Now, actual self-esteem is a really good thing, and it's great to have confidence and to love yourself and all that. So there's a healthy version of that, and there's a really unhealthy version of that. And it's the more unhealthy version probably going to be more associated with these technologically based control systems. I'm imagining things like, for example, so a virtual reality world that you can go into that just makes you feel like you're in control. In a sense, like a virtual reality world could be like a little narcissistic, solipsistic bubble. Again, redefine solipsism. It's this idea that, you're the only real character and everybody else is like, pretty much this non-player character, right? Solipsism. So virtual reality, in the future, when it's just super normal to go into VR for long periods, you could dissociate into this weird narcissistic bubble, because literally it is a truly solipsistic reality, potentially, where, you're the only one there. Everybody else is just a computer, and they could be telling you all sorts of different stuff. Maybe maybe it's just like telling you that you're great, or who knows, whatever. Even if you're interacting in VR with other people, maybe you could reskin them and make them look different. Like, I don't like how you look, I'm just going to change how you look. You know what I mean? Like, everything is like super duper customized. And the more customizable your reality is, where you have total control over it, the more you tend to stay in this weird narcissistic, solipsistic bubble, right? This unhealthy kind of ego inflation, and it is a dissociated, unhealthy, not in reality kind of a state. Again, I mentioned selfies, things like that, nothing wrong with taking selfies, like nothing, like have a good time with your friends, whatever. But, another example, using technology, doing something excessively, like that, where it's like, go to an event every 5 minutes, you're taking a picture of yourself and posting it. And, that's definitely out of balance. Right. I'm just imagining technology can be used potentially, obviously not all uses are bad, but could be used to induce all sorts of different weird psychic states of inflation and also of dissociation. All right. So into the solution. Self-love and soul esteem, and I'll get into what that is, are essential to counter the program of worthlessness and enable one to see what's in the shadow. So, see your darkness and love yourself anyway. Now, so I'm going to kind of switch things up here for a second. Again, we're getting out of the diagnosis mode and into the treatment and into things that are a little bit maybe less heavy, right? So this idea that if you're exploring the shadow and you're seeing things that aren't always the best in you. Remember also the shadow has the gold. There's good parts in there too. So you just don't know about yourself, but a lot of it's kind of like, I have this tendency to do this and that's not the best or whatever it is, right? Things that are problematic. If you're facing that, if you can figure out a way to do that with a certain level of self-love, self-compassion, then it's going to be easier for you to see that material. Now, I know that's easier said than done, of course, right? I'm not saying that it's like you can just press a button and be like, done deal, right? But if you can have a certain level of compassion where you can be really kind to yourself and forgive yourself, it's easier to see some of these things that aren't your best traits. You know what I mean? So, the tendency a lot of time is that we'll get pushed into situations where, we'll be forced to a reckoning to see certain things, right? And again, that's what is, I believe, happening on a collective level. But if we can figure out how to actually be kind to ourselves, it makes this process a lot easier. And we're going to tend to run, because you will run screaming out of, the way I've heard it put by Robert Ohado, cool guy, you will run screaming out of the shadow or out of your unconscious, right? If you are in there in a state of self-judgment, because you're going to be like, this is too much, this is too painful, I'm going to like run the hell out of there, right? So soul esteem, another term I also got from Robert Ohado. He's an astrologer, but very psychologically oriented and very intelligent, better than a lot of the other astrology people out there. But he basically said that like soul esteem is, so instead of this kind of like more artificial self-esteem where it's like people tell me I'm great, or here's all the qualities that are good about me and I write a list, which, you know, that's also fine. Not saying that's bad. Soul esteem is, this comes directly from on high. This comes from a deeper source of who you actually are. Soul esteem is, it's a more grounded and balanced way to feel good about yourself, because it's not like, this says, soul esteem says, I have a right to feel good about who I am by virtue of who I am on this very deep level, versus just like, here are a list of my positive attributes, and here are the ways that I'm better at certain things than other people, right? You know what I mean? So this is a much higher dimensional kind of self-esteem, this soul esteem. A little bit of an esoteric concept, but I think some of you guys will kind of get that. This comes from a different source. This comes from a deeper place, this soul esteem. But yes, there seems to be this program of worthlessness, and it seems to be tied into this whole weird matrix thing. Where does it come from? I can't really say. And again, like I told you guys, my job is not to tell you who the devil is, just how he operates, right? Again, you could say the word like devil could be a literal devil for some people. It could be a metaphor for others. It could be a group of people for others. Like whatever that term means, it's, you know, I'm leaving this completely open-ended. Devil, matrix, prison, all these like heavy concepts of like bad or evil or control, right? Whatever that is, I'll let you define it. But it seems to be, this is one of the ways that we are controlled, is this weird program of worthlessness, of telling us that we are less than who we actually are, making us small, because who we are is not actually small. We have been made artificially small by making ourselves think we are small, and then we compensate by inflating ourselves in this fake way. So the hyperinflation, the narcissistic tendencies, that is a compensatory mechanism, again, to fight this feeling of worthlessness we've been programmed with. And so it's like this action reaction, this dialectic, right? Of like, we're going to program you to make you feel horrible, and then we're going to actually watch you do these different silly things to make yourself feel good again. In a sense, what the system does is it robs you of something and then it sells it back to you, right? So honest marketing is like, hey, we made this great product and here's all the great attributes about our product, right? Dishonest marketing is like, we're going to show you all these people who, like, you know, who are better than you, and we're going to make you feel bad about yourself, right? And then we're going to kind of, in a sense, steal your confidence away, make you feel crappy, and then sell it back to you by saying, well, if you do buy this thing, right? So it's this weird kind of manipulative style of marketing, right? So yeah, that's one reflection, right? We're gonna kind of make you feel extra bad, and then we're gonna give you this fake solution for how to feel good, but you're still trapped in this whole system the whole time, right? You think you found a solution. Well, I feel good about myself again, but it's a fake feeling good. It's not a real feeling good. It's not a feeling good based on soul esteem. It's not a grounded way of doing it. And we're all human. We're all susceptible to this. I certainly am. We all are. So, you know, and even people who seem very advanced, maybe you're super advanced spiritual teachers, a lot of them still, we're all, you know, human. If you're in human form, you're to some extent probably susceptible to all this kind of stuff, you know. So just FYI. But yeah, see your darkness and love yourself anyway. Yeah, I know we're getting real new agey here, aren't we? It's true though. It really is. It really is. So these are these matrix countermeasures. So again, I will redefine this. What is a matrix countermeasure? What does this actually mean? Again, this idea that there are multiple levels to the matrix, whatever you want to define that is, this control system, you know, if you want to call it that. And we move through it layer by layer, right? They're like grades in a sense, and the matrix is like an onion. We go from the center where we're completely and utterly asleep, and then we go out toward the periphery of the onion, right? We get closer and closer to actually exiting. And the game that we're playing is, we have this, we try to move farther and farther out to escape it. And then at each level, it figures out new ways, new countermeasures for how to keep us asleep. And again, do I mean this literally? Is this a metaphor for how the human mind works? Again, it's much more artful for me to not actually lock in some of these ideas and make them overly concrete. So don't think that you know exactly what I'm talking about. Just think of this as a metaphor and let it kind of sink in on a metaphorical way that works with your worldview. So yeah, again, not going to define some of this stuff. But yes, matrix countermeasures, distraction, that's a big one. I think technology has become the ultimate distraction. I personally probably use Instagram more than I should. So, I have personal experience with this. But yes, lots of ways we can become distracted. Like I said before, and I'm going to actually get to this again, getting us focused on things that actually aren't that important, distracting us, getting us to focus on, sometimes what you think is important actually isn't. And this goes along also with getting too concerned with pointing the finger at who the bad guys are, trill baits, focusing too much on him being evil, could actually distract you and actually get you off your path. But yes, there are many, many, many forms of distraction. Stupid entertainment, technology as it gets more and more pervasive, and as the third wave folks merge with it more and more, it's going to be distraction city. This is just going to get upgraded every year as we see technology penetrating directly into the nervous system, especially. Focusing too much on the external. That's really easy to do right now because what's happening on a global level is also happening on an individual level. We are evolving and we are being asked, in a sense, to upgrade ourselves, to evolve. And part of that is some inner work. But if we are focused too much on the external and on only focusing on what the most recent crazy event is and all the new stuff, by all means, stay informed. But if we're only focusing on that, it's not ideal. That actually prevents us from doing the inner work. Censorship. That's a relevant one, isn't it? Matrix countermeasures. So this is a more obvious one, right? This is not as subtle. Some of the other ones, some of these are subtle and some of these are completely obvious. The censorship one, I think we all know, right? Like, if we're trying to spread awareness about the matrix and then it's shutting us down and saying you're not allowed to say that, that's obvious. Now, thank God there's this thing called the Streisand effect, which is awesome. If you haven't heard of it, check it out. Streisand effect, just search it on YouTube. Long story short, the Streisand effect is whenever you try to censor something and then all of a sudden you make it explode and 1,000 times more people see it as a result of your desire to suppress it. Barbara Streisand had some photos taken of her house a long time ago from a helicopter. And it was just part of some study on like the erosion of the beaches or something. And she got really mad and tried to sue for like millions and millions of dollars. And as a result, instead of like 12 or 10 people seeing this photo, thousands and thousands of people saw it and it went everywhere and it totally backfired. I think hopefully that's what's going to happen with this whole censorship situation. All the obvious stuff involving using technology to alter and control us. I mean, again, this is more about episode 1. A lot of this stuff is just more obvious, right? All the different ways that especially certain group of people who are obsessed with technology, where it's their God, are going to merge with it and stay asleep, like we've said. So I don't really have to go over this. If you're more interested in learning about the more obvious matrix countermeasures, the ones that involve surveilling, tracking, and controlling people and convincing them that it's a good idea to merge with technology, then watch episode 1. Anything that prevents shadow work or compassion. I think that the Matrix, again, whatever the hell that is, this metaphor, Matrix, wants us to become more narcissistic and less compassionate. It really does. It wants us not to connect with each other on a deep human level, wants to separate us, wants us to fight with each other. I think that algorithms are being used and propaganda techniques, brainwashing techniques are being used to basically separate us and make us fight with each other. Because if we're fighting with each other, we're not looking up and actually looking at the systems of control. So divide and conquer is absolutely, I'm just going to write it, it's so important. Divide and conquer is the oldest trick in the book, and it still works really freaking well. Really well. And you can see it. You can see the Matrix using it right now, right? Taking advantage of just how, I know I probably wrote that too small where you can barely see it, but divide and conquer, right? So making us fight with each other, making us focus on pointing the finger at each other, too much like this group is bad, this group is wrong, these guys suck, right? Obviously, we're all human and some of that's going to happen, and, don't beat yourself up, and some of that's even necessary, right? It's part of being human. It's all good. But yeah, too much of this pointing the finger, infighting, fighting, we're all susceptible to it. I certainly am, and we all are. It happens, right? But this is, just so you know, it's another tactic. It's another way of us, of keeping us asleep. Anything that prevents shadow work. Again, huge theme of this presentation, shadow work. Because that's where not only where the elements of your psyche that are not great, unconscious patterns that are destructive, things like that. That's not only where that resides, and you need to see that to evolve as a human sometimes, but it's also where the gold resides. The gold is your ability to become, again, like a Gandhi or a Martin Luther King or a sage, right? Your ability to actually become a much more brilliant expression of who you actually are. That's a reflection of you on a soul level. That's also in the shadow. That's, again, what they call the gold in the shadow. So the Matrix doesn't want you to go into your shadow, because that's how you evolve, and it's trying to keep you asleep. And that's the game we're playing, right? This force tries to keep us asleep, and we try to awaken. That's the whole game. Now, whether this force is actually even external in the first place, or whether it's even nefarious, or that's just how the whole game was set up by the one consciousness, I don't know. Who knows? Again, you're allowed to interpret this in whatever way works for you, right? I don't even want to tell you too much about my exact way of viewing this, because I don't want to impose that on you and tell you that that's how you have to believe. So I'm trying to keep at least some of this somewhat nebulous. Yeah. But yeah, like I said, increasing narcissism, because when we're in our little narcissistic bubbles and we're not connecting in an authentic way to other people, we are much easier to control. Much easier to control. So countering the countermeasures, again, obviously, number one is compassion for yourself and others. I know it sounds really hokey, and it's like just some kind of new age garbage right there. Yeah, be more compassionate. But it's absolutely true, though. It really is. It really is. This is one of the most rebellious things you can do, is by deepening your compassion for yourself and others, realizing that we're all fighting an uphill battle. We're fighting a hard battle, as the quote says, right? And especially also for yourself, too. Some people out there who are very caring, loving people are great at being compassionate to others, but really, really hard on themselves. And those people have been affected by this program of worthlessness super hardcore. I know a lot of very caring people who are very empathic, heart-centered beings who are like that. They can be compassionate to everybody else but themselves. So make sure you include self-compassion. And self-compassion, again, is not the same thing as being inflated. It's not the same thing as being like, I'm awesome and everybody else sucks. That's egomania. That's narcissism. Self-compassion is being kind to yourself, being a good inner parent to yourself, right? And nurturing yourself, and it's a much more grounded, balanced self-love. So I just, the narcissism thing and all that, that's like a fake kind of self-love. It's not real. It's very unbalanced and very weird. this is a very positive way of feeling good about yourself that comes from a deeper level, ideally. Number 2, taking breaks from technology. That's an obvious one. And again, more along lines of just the basic stuff. But I mean, even I need to hear that, even preparing for this presentation, ironically, required me to watch videos and, and like take notes on the computer. So we do need to take breaks from technology. And I'm sure everybody already knows that, but just as a reminder, exploring the shadow with self-love, as I said, if you come to a place where you're seeing things in your unconscious that are not helpful, that are challenging, do the best you can to be as kind to yourself as possible. That's super essential, right? And also, though, this works on a collective level. If you're seeing all the things that are wrong, which a lot of us are, right, of all the different institutions and systems that have been put in place that are manipulative and controlling and not helpful, try to view that with a little bit more compassion, and that's going to sometimes that can compensate for some of the anger that results, which also anger can be a natural human thing and is fine too and has its place. But just try to keep that in balance. Seeking genuine, authentic connection with others. Matrix hates it when we do that because increasingly the control system wants us to filter all of our communication through technology. That's what it wants. And certainly we can have good connections with our friends through technology too. It's not that you can't have a meaningful connection with a phone call or even a text that is, truly meaningful, authentic communication. That can happen. But if we filter all of our communication through these devices, that's a bad thing because increasingly we're seeing that those are being more heavily controlled and filtered and censored and manipulated. And also studied in the sense that our information is being captured and used to train the artificial intelligences that are going to then further manipulate us. Hope that doesn't sound too paranoid. Not that all AI will be doing that, but I'm sure some of it will be 100%. Genuine, authentic connection with others. I'm imagining, I think the ideal example is just like a bunch of homies hanging out around a campfire, getting out into nature, having good conversation. And I need to do that soon. Been too long. Who wants to go camping with me? All right, number 5, seek soul esteem, the antidote to the inflation-deflation cycle. Again, just remember that inflation and deflation, they have this relationship, right, where basically what happens is we feel kind of bad, we get deflated, then we seek things to inflate us. Things that we seek to do that are not actually all that helpful. They're kind of artificial, and technology can certainly be used to do that. And this can lead to more narcissistic tendencies. This kind of fake feeling good about yourself where you're like, I'm so awesome. Look how many likes I got on this post. And again, I'm not saying everybody should stop using all social media and that, doing that is a bad thing, right? It has its place, right? But, if our whole sense of self is wrapped up in this stuff, that's a bad thing. It's a really bad thing. Balance your neuroendocrine system. Obviously, one of the reasons that I'm even able to talk about this kind of stuff is because CHOQ is a company that actually really cares about your neuroendocrine health. Because even though we are more than just these bodies, our entire worldview, our entire outlook revolves around the functioning of our physiology, of our neurophysiology, our nervous system, our hormones, all that stuff. And of course, we're very aware as a company, and I'm sure a lot of you guys are, that, there's a lot of weird chemicals out there, that a lot of us are eating frankenfood, and there's heavy metals and radiation and all sorts of weird stuff going on. EMFs, they're throwing off our physiology. They're also making it harder for us to function. So again, this is on a more basic level. This is not going to be on the super heady, deep philosophical, psychological level of some of the other stuff, but also important. And again, another one that's real basic, get outside. This is increasingly important though. Just reconnect with nature. Even just a short nature walk earlier for like 45 minutes and getting a little bit of sun on my face was life-changing, So even a little bit is good. Don't consume yourself too much with finger pointing. It's another one, like I've said this multiple times. I think it's important though, because it's really easy right now with the state of the world and things going crazy right now and all of this divisiveness and this fighting between groups. Like, which team are you on? How do you see this topic? Don't get too caught up. Obviously, some of this has its place. Let yourself be a human. Don't be like, I'm never, ever going to get mad at anybody again. That's just dumb, right? It's going to happen. Like, be a human, right? But if you overdo it and you just get too caught up in pointing the finger and getting mad at the evil people or who sucks or who's bad or whatever, that's not helpful. And that actually will get you stuck. And in fact, really, I do have to say one more time, I want to emphasize the control system, the matrix, whatever you want to call it, actually wants us to get distracted. And at a certain level of the onion within the matrix, you're highly susceptible to this. So I'm sure that there's at least a few folks who maybe needed to hear that. Maybe I'm one of them. Ask the question, how might this situation be helping me or us? Again, things are going totally insane on the planet. All sorts of wacky stuff's happening. Things are freaking falling apart. So it can be helpful. Not that we have to be airy-fairy, head in the clouds 24/7 and pretend that everything's hunky-dory when it's not. Don't do that. Don't spiritually bypass and say like, oh, everything's fine when it's not. All right. But at the same time, when weird stuff's happening, stuff that's dark and scary or whatever, falling apart, if you ask the question, how might this situation be helping me? Or on a collective level, how might it be helping us? Like the events of the last 2 years. A lot of them seem really horrible and heavy and tragic. At the same time, if you ask the question, how might this be helping us? You might find that, you come up with some interesting answers, right? I think personally that even though, not to downplay any of the suffering that's happened on the planet the last couple of years since all this stuff started happening, but I haven't intuitively felt from the beginning that we need this as a collective. We need all this stuff to happen, and this is part of our evolution, as messy and painful and awful as it is. So yes. And then, I literally had to write this twice, compassion for yourself and other, while also, though, fiercely drawing boundaries and standing up for your rights. So, there are some very kind-hearted people out there who are very compassionate, but they're also doormats. And I would never want to advocate that either. Some people out there are so kind and compassionate that they will let other people walk all over them. And you don't want to do that either, obviously. But, you got to figure out where you are and what the balance is that's right for you. But I really do feel like this is a time collectively when the perhaps more sociopathic individuals who are trying to manipulate and dominate and control us, especially using technology and other means, when we do need to, peacefully, right, draw boundaries and make our feelings known, right, and stand up for our rights. That's very important. While at the same time, again, finding that balance, not getting too caught up in the anger and the hatred for those individuals. And I know a lot of you guys like to use this term. As one of my last ones here. Is this a spiritual war? People, a lot of people have said this is a spiritual war that's happening right now. I don't personally always like to use that because it has some weird baggage around it. But I mean, by all means, like there are many times where I look at the weirdness that's going on and I'm inclined to be like, yeah, I think that might be happening. It kind of, seems like this like whole battle between good and evil thing. I can kind of feel that out. Also, though, no, I'm going to say yes and no. I'm not going to make up my mind on this one. And the reason I say no is because when you really feel into the frequency of this, it can tend to make things a little bit heavier than they need to be. And that on the higher levels, as you're exiting the matrix, the higher levels of the onion skin, things get a little less dualistic, perhaps. That's all I'll say about that. I don't want to go too far into that. But, I think this idea of good versus evil has a lot of reality to it. Perhaps on the ultimate level, that might not be exactly what's happening. But I don't know. Again, I don't know. I really have no idea. And whatever belief works for you, keep doing it. And one of the very last things I came up with just to say was, don't hate the matrix, study it. whatever the matrix means to you, the matrix, the devil, the control system, whatever it is, right? It's not about hating it. It's about studying it. Like I said before, I'm not here to tell you who the devil is, just how he operates. So it's about studying certain forces that might exist, right? Whether those forces are internal or external, again, whether those forces are an actual external evil force or whether these forces are really just forces within your own mind, however you want to, whatever system works for you, again. But it's not about hating that. Too much of that will get you stuck. So just study it, study how it moves and understand it so that you can escape. And don't forget to laugh. Is that my last line? I think it is. Yeah, it's my last slide. Don't forget to laugh. One of the reasons that I'm able to actually go down these rabbit holes and study all this crazy stuff is because I have a pretty excellent sense of humor most of the time, not always. But keep your sense of humor if you can. Don't get too caught up in the getting pissed off. Obviously, there's a time to be pissed off, right? But keep your sense of humor. If you kind of zoom out, some of the stuff that people do, the crazy things that people do, is actually kind of funny. I did want to end though, actually, on as far as individuals who've perhaps made it. Shelby, you're exactly right. Best therapy is to laugh about it. So certain individuals that have perhaps made it to a higher level of the matrix, right? One of these outer layers of the onion skin in this metaphor I'm talking about, right? Or a higher grade level, perhaps. Not that anyone's better than anyone else. I'd say Gandhi is probably a pretty good example. I mean, who knows? I'm sure one of you guys is going to be like, Gandhi is controlled opposition, or like, he's actually evil. But no, I think Gandhi's legit. If you got assassinated, you're probably legit, unfortunately. But there's so many good Gandhi quotes, and it's really cliched to say a lot of these. A lot of these we already know, but just to end with, like the kind of person who would say things like this is the kind of person who's at a certain level of awareness that, can be helpful because you can kind of tap into that for a second. An eye for an eye will only make the whole world blind. Even those of us who are pretty awake, we tend to get into this retaliation, this retaliatory sort of vibe, right? We're like, the bad people need to pay. It's like, yes, hold people accountable. But, again, that can get a bit extreme and isn't always the highest vibration. People like Gandhi and Martin Luther King, I think one of the reasons that they were so influential and so, actually created so much change is because they actually weren't fighting fire with fire. They were fighting fire with water, which is way more effective, right? They refused to, endorse violence, right? Because what happens is if you endorse violence and you just, somebody's angry and you just get angry back and then you're punching each other and fighting each other. If you do that, what you're doing is you're just repeating the past. These are the same cycles that humans have gone through. When you see violent revolutions, it's like, it seems like things get better for a little bit and then they just get worse. And then right back where we started, the people who did the violent revolution, then they become the new tyrants. And then there has to be, right? And we just repeat the cycle, right? And people like this, who are on this higher level, they grokked that. They understood that. So, and again, I'm not saying that everybody has their part to play. They really do. Going back to the original Matt Kahn video of the 3 waves of ascension, everybody has their part to play, So I see this whole thing as like this kind of drama. It's divine drama. Again, however you want to see it's cool. And so whatever's going to happen is going to happen. But I think personally, if you're the kind of person who resonates with this message, that's cool. If not, that's cool too. Whatever works for you. But these kind of folks, MLK, Gandhi kind of folks, that vibe, that's what we need more of. Thich Nhat Hanh, the really awesome Vietnamese Buddhist monk, he passed away like a week ago or something, a few days ago. He was in his 90s, 95, I think. And he also hung out with those cats and, nonviolent, very aware, and you can actually produce a lot more change through nonviolent type action. And that is actually one of the more rebellious matrix aware, one of the most matrix aware, I believe, techniques is stuff like that. So yeah. All right. Well, let's see. It's been an hour and 34 minutes. What else? I wonder if I was planning on going for up to 2 hours. I'm going to come full circle, and if anybody wants to ask any questions, go for it. I don't really feel like talking about supplements right now. Let's try to keep it on topic within this whole topic of staying human and all that. And fire away. Seraphim says, "What do you think of Malcolm X? Was he fighting fire with fire?" Seraphim, I don't really know for sure. Based on the little bit I know about Malcolm X, it certainly seems like he does. He was. He was definitely maybe not on the same spiritual wavelength, perhaps, as MLK. But again, did he have a part to play in all of this, and did he accomplish some good things? Maybe. I'm not as familiar with everything that he did to where I can really pass judgment, but certainly it does seem like he kind of was. You're very welcome, Shelby. This was a pleasure. Thanks for being here. Yeah. Going back over here, though, just full circle. You can't escape from a prison if you don't know you're in one. And so everybody's in their own, in a sense, not to be too heavy-handed, but everybody's in a kind of a prison. And it's okay. It just, at every level of your development, every time you go to this next stage, this stage was the new stage, right? That kept you, that helped you awaken. And then eventually, when it's time for you to exit that stage, it then becomes oppressive and becomes prison, right? Relatively speaking. So, yeah. What are your thoughts on QR codes, says JJ? I don't really know. I mean, I think there's people who are like, QR codes are inherently evil. I don't necessarily think that. Obviously, I think it's like many other forms of technology where it could be used in different ways. So I think if it's just like, here's a QR code and scan this and then check out this event or something, right? Why not? It's just, it's pretty neutral. But if it's like, hey, we're going to force you to tattoo this QR code on your face, probably not great. So I guess it would depend on how it's used, like so many other forms of technology. Yeah. Well, if there aren't any more questions, I might finish up here actually in a moment. Once again, I will have to say, Shelby, you're exactly right that the best therapy is to laugh about it. Always keep your sense of humor as much as you can. There's a lot to laugh about. Things are probably going to get even crazier in the world, and if you're watching this in 2025, it'll be interesting to see if I was right or not, but it seems like the vibe I've heard from a lot of people seems to be that, 2022 is just going to get even weirder. So keep your wits about you, prepare yourself physically, emotionally, spiritually, and keep your sense of humor. Shakalala says, would you ever allow yourself to be chipped? Have you even met me? No. That's going to be a no. Good question, though. Thank you for the question. All right. Cool. Well, I'm actually going to head out, guys. Thank you for being here. I appreciate y'all a lot. I know this is some pretty intense material, and some of it might have even been kind of uncomfortable to listen to. But you guys are awesome. Always appreciate y'all, all the regulars. Much love. And, of course, stay human.